Nahida has finally come to us here in Genshin Impact, and she's a phenomenal Dendro character, and easily the best one we have so far. And yeah, I know there's only 3 Dendro characters right now, but I think Nahida is still going to be one of the better, if not the best Dendro character for a while, because, well, 1, on the account of the fact that she's the Archon, and 2, her kit is just insane in general, and the way it works is extremely strong, and if they surpass that, then it's going to get really wild in the game. But she's easily amazing and going to be amazing for a while, so let's talk about how to build her. Hi there, my name's Blossums, and today we're going to be going over our Nahida build guide, what you're going to want to be looking for in her artifacts, her weapons, her different teammates, etc. So as you can imagine, we've got quite a bit to cover, but before we do, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this kind of content. It helps me out a ton and I really appreciate it. But let's talk about Nahida's kit. So let's talk a little bit about Nahida's kit and how it works, as it's a very strong kit, and you'll see why she's easily our best Dendro character. And Nahida has this interesting flexibility designed in her kit to where she can either be your on-field Dendro character to, you know, have her as a DPS or something if you'd like, or she can be a pure support. And you'll see what I mean when we start describing some of these things. But first up, with her normal attacks, she is a catalyst user, so they're all Dendro based. She does, you know, general Dendro damage, very first Dendro catalyst user here. Nothing too fancy about these normal attacks. They are very cool though. As for her elemental skill, all schemes to know. Now this is where pretty much all of your damage is going to be coming from for Nahida. This is your elemental skill. It has a press and hold function. When you press it, it just does a little bit of AoE Dendro damage around you, marking opponents around you with a Seed of Skanda. And it also has a hold function to where it lifts Nahida a little bit into the air, and you're able to aim at your opponents and, you know, basically do a full 360 if you'd like, and deal Dendro damage to them that way, and also mark them. Of course, the benefit of the hold function is that it deals a little bit more damage, and you have a little bit more flexibility as to who you're marking and being able to mark from a distance, as the press function is not a very big AoE or anything. It's just in your immediate vicinity, so if they're right next to you, then go ahead and do the press. It has a lower cooldown as well, but for the most part, you're likely going to be using the hold portion of her elemental skill. And the mark that she puts on opponents, the Seed of Skanda, is the big part of Nahida's kit. This is where everything is essentially focused, and opponents who have been marked by the Seed of Skanda will be linked to one another up to a certain distance. After you trigger elemental reactions on opponents who are affected by the Seed of Skanda, or when they take damage from Dendro cores, including the damage done by Burgeon and Hyper Bloom damage, Nahida will unleash Tri-Karma Purification on the opponents and all connected opponents, dealing Dendro damage based on her attack and elemental mastery. You can trigger at most 1 Tri-Karma Purification within a short period of time. So yeah, you're going to mark them initially with a skill, deal Dendro damage to them that way, but the moment you deal an elemental reaction to an opponent, it's also going to trigger this Tri-Karma Purification and then deal Dendro damage that way, allowing you to have a source of off-field Dendro application. Because if you didn't notice here, it doesn't say that the Tri-Karma Purification gets rid of your mark, your Seed of Skanda there, and that's because it doesn't. So it stays on them, and essentially it just follows an internal cooldown that it has on itself as to how, you know, rapid you can trigger Tri-Karma Purification as well as apply the Dendro actual element there. And this is pretty cool. So you can sit there, apply Dendro, you know, deal an elemental reaction to your opponents, and they're going to get extra Dendro damage on top of that. And that does scale with your elemental mastery and attack. So attack and elemental mastery are very valuable on her. And this also has a duration of 25 seconds on the Seed, so you are not pressed for time. And if you have a character that likes to be on the field for a long period of time, somebody like Sino is a very noteworthy person for this, then this is going to last that entire duration of their elemental burst, or, you know, them setting themselves up. And as you can see, the Tri-Karma Purification has a trigger interval of 2.5 seconds there, so you can only activate it every so often. But as it said, it does trigger on all opponents that are connected to each other, so if you deal an elemental reaction to only one, then the others are still going to get the damage from the Tri-Karma Purification, which is very nice. Another really important and noteworthy aspect to this elemental skill is that it does trigger from opponents and environmental elements around the field. So say an opponent has electro on them already and has the seed triggered on them. If they like step into a puddle or something and trigger electro charged on themselves, that's still going to trigger your Tri-Karma Purification there. So keep that in mind. They can also activate it themselves, or maybe they cause like a burgeon or something. This can apply to themselves and have that Tri-Karma Purification activated on them, which is very nice. And I'd say the elemental skill is really the core of her kit and how you're going to be using her. You're just going to be marking opponents, leaving the field, or marking opponents and staying on the field and being supported by your other units. However, her elemental burst is still very important, and that's not because it's dealing damage or anything, but it is contributing to her elemental skill. And the way her elemental burst works, the illusory heart here, is when the Shrine of Maya field is unleashed, the following effects will be separately unleashed based on the element types present within the party. So if you have Pyro, you get damage bonus for your Tri-Karma Purification. If you have Electro, the interval at which Tri-Karma Purification can occur is decreased, so that 2.5 we saw earlier is decreased if you have an Electro unit. And then Hydro, the presence of this elemental burst lasts even longer. And then if there are two party members of those elements that we mentioned, the effect is actually increased there. And you'll see that reflected here. So Electro, if you have one character, it's decreased by 0.4 seconds. But if you have two characters, it's decreased by 0.6 seconds. And the others, you can see that as well. This has a base duration of 15 seconds. But if you have a Hydro character, you get another 5, which is 20. And its cooldown inherently is 13.5 seconds. So it theoretically has a 100% uptime as long as you have some decent energy recharge, and the fact that it only costs 50 energy means you don't have to invest much in energy recharge in order to get it off of cooldown, so you're pretty much always going to have her elemental burst whenever you need it. Whenever you unleash our elemental burst, the Shrine of Maya will gain the following effect. Reminder, Shrine of Maya is our elemental burst there. But essentially, the elemental mastery of the active character within the field will be increased by 25% of the elemental mastery of the party member with the highest elemental mastery, and you gain a maximum of 250 elemental mastery in this manner. So this is really cool because no matter how you're building Nahida, whether you're really investing on the elemental mastery side of things, which is always very valuable for her for another reason you'll see soon, or if your other character in the party is the one who's really invested into elemental mastery, somebody like Kazuha, then it will account for their elemental mastery instead and give the highest bonus that you can get for your current team, which is really awesome and it can allow you to get a lot of elemental mastery for free essentially. And then her next passive is also really good. For every point of elemental mastery that she has beyond 200, it'll grant 0.1% bonus damage and 0.03% crit rate to Tri-Karma Purification, all schemes to know, and a maximum of 80% bonus damage and 24% crit rate can be granted by this. So the big takeaway here, you notice that the cap outs for both of these actually end up matching up to 1,000 elemental mastery. So if you hit 1,000 elemental mastery, you are good to go. You can no longer receive any more benefits from these two passives. So elemental mastery is very valuable on her. So overall, Nahida is pretty insane. Her kit is really strong. Her ability to apply Dendro is very good and much better than our other two units that we have currently, and she can easily cover Dendro for a team rather than you feeling like you need 2 Dendro units, so that's really awesome. But not only that, she's giving elemental mastery and she can actually dish out some solid damage herself. So how do we want to build her? So let's go ahead and move on to her artifact sets, and most of you are likely going to be using one artifact set for the set bonus, but there is technically a better one. However, it is circumstantial, and you'll notice that is a common theme for how you're building your Nahida, even when it comes to main stats and whatnot, as that can shift a lot depending on how you're using her and who you're using her with. And I'll go over all of that and more, but first let's talk about these artifact set bonuses, and I think the vast majority of you are likely going to be using the Deepwood Memory set. You get that 15% Dendro damage bonus, but more importantly, you get that Dendro resistance decrease, which is extremely good and very important because not only does this increase Nahida's damage, but this is also going to increase any hyper blooms, or burgeons you do, as those count as Dendro damage. So that is extremely important to have, especially when you have a Dendro character on your team and a consistent applier of Dendro like Nahida. So you're likely going to have this on her if she's the only Dendro character in your party. If you're using another Dendro character, somebody like the Traveler or Cole, then maybe you'd like to have this set on them, and then for Nahida, you could use something like the Gilded Dream set, because this can give you just so much elemental mastery that'll allow you to hit that cap of 1000 elemental mastery in order to bestow the most benefits to your party, with the elemental mastery bestowal of 250 there, as well as the increase in damage for the Trikarma Purification and the crit rate increase for it. This will end up being a better artifact set for her, and she might get an increase in attack percent there, which is very good. So it is very dependent on who you're using for that team, but for the most part, the Deepwood Memory is going to be the best set on her. However, if somebody else has it, then you're going to want to use something like Gilded Dreams at that point. Now, of course, you can split this up into some different split sets if you just don't have a good full set. A Gilded Dream split set along with something like the, the Wonders Troop set is actually quite good, as well as splitting that up with the Deepwood Memories or something. That is a-okay, but optimally, you're going to want to try and get a 4-piece Deepwood Memory set or a 4-piece Gilded Dream set. Now we'll move on to the actual main stats, and this is going to vary a bit. I think there are two kind of common ways most people are going to be building their Nahida, and we'll go over theirs first. And then I think there's a little bit more of an optimal way to build Nahida. However, it is dependent on you having very good substats, and that's just going to be difficult for most people and pretty unobtainable, but it is technically possible, and that's why I'm still going to go over it. So I think the route most people are going to be taking is either kind of a traditional DPS setup for Nahida or a full support setup for Nahida. And the traditional DPS setup is exactly what you think it is. I don't have it equipped now, but you're likely just going to be going attack percent, Dendro damage bonus on the goblet, and then crit rate or crit damage on the circlet there, and then just shooting for as many elemental mastery substats as you possibly can. And if you're going for a full support Nahida, which I think the majority of people are kind of going for, then you're just going to go full elemental mastery on all of your main stats there, and that's going to work out great. As going full elemental mastery and then having something like an elemental mastery weapon is going to be the easiest way to hit that 1000 elemental mastery marker to give the highest benefit to your team of bestowing that 250 elemental mastery and giving her the additional crit rate on her Trikarma Purification, as well as the damage bonus there. However, I do think there is a technical, better way to do this, and these builds themselves are very dependent on who you are running in your party. So for an example, say you're running somebody like Kazuha or Kuki Shinobu who are elemental mastery centric, and you already have them at 1000 elemental mastery. Well, then it's going to be better to focus more on damage for Nahida with things like attack percent or the Dendro damage bonus goblet, and then crit rate and crit damage, and then just looking for your elemental mastery substats in the substats themselves rather than the main stats, because her one passive accounts for the highest elemental mastery in the party, not necessarily Nahida herself. So you'll still be getting that full benefit for your team when the Shrine of Maya is up, even if she has relatively low elemental mastery, and then that way you could still get a little bit of the damage bonus from the other passive and a little bit of the crit rate, while inevitably dealing higher damage because you focused more on damage on your actual artifact setup. So this is what I mean, where it becomes very difficult because it is highly dependent on how you are running her for what is going to be the most optimal. And I think a lot of you are just going to end up with full elemental mastery or a full DPS type of setup, because those are kind of the easiest to do there, and those are going to yield you the better results for either the damage you're looking for or the better support capabilities that you're looking for. Now, if you just want what I think is going to be the best in general overall for pretty much every circumstance for that you put Nahida in, then I think you should just go full elemental mastery, and then looking for things like attack percent, crit rate, crit damage on your substats as much as possible, as that'll guarantee that you're still getting that 250 elemental mastery for everybody on the team, as well as still gaining that additional crit rate for the Trikarma Purification and a little bit of that extra damage. But I did say I think there is a optimal build for Nahida, as in my opinion it is the best build for Nahida, but it is substantially harder to obtain due to it requiring very good substats. So what is that build that I'm talking about? What do I think is the more optimal build for Nahida? Well, I think the best sort of main stat build for your Nahida is actually going to be something like Elemental Mastery, Dendro damage bonus, and then Elemental Mastery again. And the reason for this is this allows you to still get a very high version of the buff. And if you just have insane substats, you could probably still hit 1000 Elemental Mastery, but even so, you're still getting a very high version of the buff. You might be down a few elemental mastery points there, but then this allows you to still deal some really good damage. However, it is really going to require you still having good crit rate and crit damage substats, as well as still getting good elemental mastery substats on top of that, and then potentially having attack percent as a substat as well on a lot of your pieces. It's going to require really good substats, and if you have a weapon, this really eliminates the need for the attack percentage. We'll go over that later, and a lot of people don't have that weapon, so I'm not taking it into too much consideration. But yeah, I think replacing one of the elemental masteries with a Dendro damage bonus goblet is a very good idea, because it allows you to deal really good damage and still give the majority of the benefit to the team. However, it is going to require you to have a bit of some pretty good substats here, and you'll see that I don't even really have that good of substats here, and this is actually what I'm running. I'm not getting the full benefit that I should be from her passives, but that's okay, because I do like the damage that she ends up dealing like this, and I simply want to build upon this type of build and make it better progressively through some better substats. Now, I do keep mentioning substats. We'll go over those briefly. I think you have it wrapped around your head at this point of what you're going to be looking for. And of course, the tippy top priority for Nahida is going to be Elemental Mastery. However, if you have an Elemental Mastery main stat, you cannot get an Elemental Mastery substat. So what are your other priorities? Well, after Elemental Mastery, your next top priority is easily going to be crit rate, to make sure that you're critting as much as possible, and you get the bonus from her passive there is going to make sure that you're dealing even more damage, followed by the priority of crit damage, of course, making sure that you're dealing more damage with those crits you actually do. And then finally, attack percent is your next top priority. If you get something like energy recharge, I wouldn't cry too much about it. She really doesn't need it though. As we discussed, she already has a really good uptime on her elemental burst. It's super not necessary at all. So looking for elemental mastery, crit rate, crit damage, and attack percent are going to be your top priorities. Now, weapons for Nahida. This is where things get pretty interesting. And if you have her signature weapon at all, then of course that's going to be the best in slot 4. Makes it very easy to hit that 1000 mark threshold for her elemental mastery. It has a ton of that, and its passive is really good for the team in general. But if you don't have that, well, then you're likely looking into the 4-star category. Some of the 5 stars are pretty good on Nahida, especially if you're trying to make her deal damage. And if you want to play her that way, then a lot of the 5 stars are going to be a pretty good option, especially things that, bestow crit damage and all that jazz are going to be pretty good for you for the damage category on Nahida. But the 4-star options are actually pretty good. Something like the Wondering Even Star that was on the last gotcha banner is actually phenomenal. It is a really good choice on her. However, I know a lot of people didn't go for it, but if you have it, you get Elemental Mastery on the substat there, and based on your Elemental Mastery, you get attack percentage as well, and your team gets some of that attack percentage as well. This is hands down my favorite 4-star for her. It is very solid, and what I'm going to be using on her, because I think it's really cool, and I'm glad that I can bestow attack percentage to the team while still contributing to her kit. But since you likely don't have this because you were smart and didn't roll on a gotcha banner, what are your other options? Well, something like Sacrificial Fragments is likely going to be your best bet. Has good elemental mastery there, especially level 90. You're getting plenty of elemental mastery, making it easier to get to that 1000 marker there. Map of Mare is also a really good option, especially if you're free to play. As it's still giving you elemental mastery. It has strong base attack, which is good because she does still want that attack percentage like we mentioned, and its passive is actually pretty solid. The sacrificial passive isn't really all that useful, but you use it because its elemental mastery is so much higher than something like a Map of Mare. And then past those options, I can't really recommend a lot of these. Some of the attack percentage options are fine, especially if you want her to be like main DPS material. Dodo Tails I think is interesting maybe, but I really don't recommend them. Even if you're going main DPS and sometimes support, I would really recommend something like the Widsith because it gives you that crit damage. It has the potential to give you that attack percentage or elemental damage bonus, or you can gamble for your actual team bonus with its elemental mastery bonus there, and I think that's kind of fun and wacky, and I think this is a pretty solid option as well. So my top picks are easily things like Wandering Evening Star, Sacrificial Fragments, Map of Mare, and maybe something like the Widsith if you're feeling lucky. So where does my Nahida end up at the end of the day after all is said and done? I have her on the Elemental Mastery, Dendro Damage, Goblet, and Elemental Mastery setup that I mentioned before. She ends up at 773 Elemental Mastery, 1500 attack with 31% crit rate and 107% crit damage there. And she's going to get a little bit of additional crit rate there on her actual Trikarma Purifications from her passive there, so keep that in mind. So it's pretty decent, and the thing is, I don't really have that good of substats or anything yet. I also don't have my weapon maxed out here, so I'm still missing a little bit of Elemental Mastery from that one. But for my actual artifacts, I'm also going to go over these for you guys so you just know how I got to where I am. And you'll see that the substats here aren't necessarily all that great, and some of them aren't even fully leveled there. So there is plenty of room for improvement here, and I think I can get pretty close to 900, if not getting 900, once I get much better substats, but we'll see how lucky I get. I'll also briefly go over some of the kind of team pairings that I think she's really good on, some of the characters that I really like, and realistically, if a character benefited from Dendro in 3.0, then Nahida is going to be a good pairing for them, because Nahida is just the best Dendro unit, so you can kind of apply that logic to all of the characters, which a bunch got a buff from Dendro in general, so she's just good with a lot of characters. However, I do find it valuable to mention characters like Yae Miko that specifically scale with Elemental Mastery are a very good pairing, because naturally she's getting even more Elemental Mastery from somebody like Nahida. Also an interesting pairing is Tartaglia, which both of these characters happen to be coming on a rerun, which I don't think is a coincidence. Tartaglia is pretty cool with Nahida because they both kind of have that marking mechanic, and you can really pop off with the both of them. I actually have a pretty insane clip of just like the most ridiculous amount of numbers going on with the both of them, so they're a pretty fun pairing as well. And I also did mention that characters like Kuki Shinobu or characters like Kazuha are very good pairings for Nahida because of their Elemental Mastery scaling as well. And if you can hit 1000 Elemental Mastery on somebody like Kuki Shinobu, then you don't need to on Nahida and can focus more on damage, and that can really lend itself to some very interesting team compositions. So yeah, in the end, Nahida is going to be really good for a lot of characters that like Dendro, and she's just going to pair really well for them, especially some of our latest characters. Characters like Nilou are really good with Nahida because you can give Nilou some extra Elemental Mastery, which is very nice. Characters like Sino, who spend a lot of the time on the field during their Elemental Burst, he has a very long Elemental Burst, are going to benefit from Nahida as well because that Seed of Skanda lasts for 25 seconds. So yeah, she's going to pair really well for a lot of characters, and if you need a Dendro character on your team, she's probably going to be the best option for that team for a while. Well, that's going to close out today's video. I hope it helped you build your Nahida, because she does have some variation in those builds to most optimally use her for the different teams that you plan to use her in. And I hope I helped you out with that. But let me know in the comment section below if you got Nahida, how you're enjoying her, and how you're going to end up building her. And other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. My name's Blossums, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.